Welcome to the Faith and Fishing Podcast, where you get to hear all kinds of fishermen tell their stories and share their faith. I'm your host, Cam Steele. Hey y'all, how's it going? Welcome back to the Faith and Fishing Podcast. This is the third episode, and I'm your host, Cam, and we are going to dive right back into our interview with Chad Hoover. If you haven't heard the first part of this interview, go back and listen to episode 2 of the podcast. You can hear all of this awesome interview. So without further ado, let's jump right back into our interview with Chad Hoover. All right, so this next question, I asked my fishing buddy, I was like, I want you to think of a question that nobody ever asked on any fishing podcast. So I know you're filming a lot of the times whenever you're out of the water, you're out on the water. So you may not necessarily get to do this very often, but what is your typical conversation centered around whenever you're out fishing with somebody?
Wow, that's a good one. It depends. If I'm fishing with an influencer, we're usually talking about content and the different types of things and what we can do better. If I'm fishing with a fan or a subscriber, they're usually asking me a lot of questions similar to what, we talk about on things like this. What's your favorite place to fish? What's your most memorable moment? If it's an old military buddy, we're generally talking about military stuff. We talk about, honestly, the other things other than fishing. Believe it or not, when my son and I are fishing, we're talking about hunting. And when we're driving to fishing, we're usually talking about hunting. And when we're driving home from fishing, we're talking about hunting. When we're on the water, we're talking about hunting. It's everything but fishing, to be honest with you, which is funny now that you're forcing me to think about it. Talk a lot about UFC and college football, other sports. Probably everything but fishing.
Awesome. So whenever you're out hunting, are you then talking about fishing?
What's funny, man? One of the main reasons that I like hunting is, it is the one time, for whatever reason, I can just be still. I may think about things and reflect on things and strategize in my mind about the next step in my business or in my life or whatever, but really hunting's my dead brain time. It's when I actually do get to kind of pull it back, to idle. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure.
Honestly, I probably don't think about anything other than where am I going to sit the next day, or if it's a morning hunt, how long am I going to stay? When am I getting out of the tree? I'm also doing a lot of things like, should I be in the tree right now? Should I be still hunting? Dang, the wind is switching. So honestly, when I'm hunting, I kind of am hunting. To be honest with you, I'm thinking about all the variables associated with it. Should I have come in the way that I come in? Should I, generally stuff like that. I'm working on the strategy of hunting because, I don't want to hunt professionally, but if I'm going to do something, I generally try to be as good at it as I possibly can. And I take hunting real seriously, and it's fun, but at the same time, I like to be successful, It ain't about the killing per se, but it's about the experience and, trying to do as well as you can, even if it doesn't happen, is still part of the experience for me. So, that's it. I probably think about hunting. I like hunting, obviously. I think about hunting a lot when I'm not hunting, and I think about hunting when I'm hunting. So, it's I haven't got to do it as much since I started the whole fishing career thing. And while I was in the military, I traveled a lot, so I didn't get to do it as much. So looking forward to getting back to it. We're going to try to do some turkey hunting now that I've actually got a little bit more free time, as long as turkey hunting doesn't get doesn't get shut down, and we'll go from there.
All right. So you mentioned you are a father. So what life advice do you wish that you had been able to start off with, and that you hope that, or that you're going to make sure you pass along with your kids?
Well, ironically enough, I had this conversation with my son over the last 2 years. I started him fishing at about 8 months, carrying him around in a backpack. By 18 months old, he was, walking while fishing with me. By 3 years old, he was ready to he had been in the kayak with me all along, but he was ready to get into his own kayak. Daddy, I want my own kayak, I want my own kayak. And by 4, he had his own kayak. And I know this is going to it sounds worse when I say it now, and some people go, that's not bad, but it kind of is, even if you think it's good. I probably took him fishing 250, 300 days a year till he was 13, 14. But by like 13 or 14, he had been fishing and filming. So the fishing was not just fun fishing, it was work. It was nothing for me back then to drag a kayak a mile through the woods to get to a hard spot to get to. He was right there with me. So I didn't have a good balance. I fished hard, made him fish hard with me. I felt like, man, I wish my dad would have did this with me, at that level and things like that. So, don't burn them out, I guess, is the one thing that I would say. Don't go too hard too fast. Don't go overboard with it, and don't obsess about it. Make it fun for them, And I think I rationalized in my mind that it's fishing, it's the outdoors, how could it be bad? And I just didn't have a good balance. So don't burn them out.
Yeah, absolutely, and that'll apply to a lot of things outside of fishing too.
Yep. Oh yeah. It's just like anything else. These things about other things, but you generally say to yourself, "Oh, it's fishing. It's outdoors. How could too much of it be bad?" And it can be, especially for a kid, and not just too much of it, but like I wasn't taking him on little 1 and 2 hour outings. I was taking them on 12, 14, 16 hour days of grinding,
Right.
When he was 11, I took him to Canada, and we paddled 4 miles to get to a mountain to portage the kayaks over, drag them a mile over to the other side, and paddled 8 more miles, 11-mile total paddle with a mile portage in the middle both ways. So we paddled 22 miles in a day. And he's 10 or 11 years old, and he did that trip with me. Now, when he's 25 or 26 or 27, he's going to look back on it and go, man, that was awesome. But at the time, he was going, this is insanity. And by the time he was 13, he was burnt out. He literally, for probably 3 years, we fished together 4 or 5 times a year instead of 200 or 300 times a year. So, yeah, don't burn them out.
All right, and would you say that's also the fishing advice that you wish you had been able to start off with?
The fishing advice that I wish I had thought about, been able to start off with, would be to learn everything about fishing, not just to learn about baits and lures, but to learn holistically the effects of weather, the effects of bait fish movement, what are the bait fish movement tendencies, seasonal progression, things along those lines. I wish sooner rather than later in my life I would have thought of fishing holistically instead of, in little bitty colanders, in little bitty isolated buckets. And it just makes so many things. And the same thing with hunting, same thing with everything. It makes things easier when you think of them holistically. So if I had something to pass on, is to look at the big picture sooner, try to learn a little bit more about weather and its effect, seasonal progression and its effect, solunar and its effect, and then the standard predictable seasonal progression of the things that fish do. It leads to a lot less frustration, a lot less wasted time on the water. And if you are that person that can only go to the gym once a week, you get more out of it because you've got more preparation before you go, you know?
Absolutely. All right, so you've gotten a chance to catch a lot of different fish in a lot of different places. Is there a particular fish that sits at the top of your bucket list to catch?
Yeah. I want to catch a golden dorado down in Argentina. It's just one of those fish that every video I've ever seen, every angler that I've ever talked to about it, they light up like a Christmas tree when you start talking about it. It's an aggressive fish. It readily takes flies in top waters. It's big, powerful, aggressive, and not too picky, you know? So, and it's in a very exotic location. So that's definitely at the top of my bucket list, and something that hopefully I can knock off of there at some point. Luckily, I've got to catch a lot of bucket list fish, and I tell people I have more of a bucket mouth list than a bucket list because I like to catch bucket mouths all over the country. And, you know, I try not to dream too much about too many different exotic species because I still ain't got bass figured out, and I've been doing it for 30 plus years, so almost 40, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I want to do a lot more fly fishing. Fly fishing is my fishing, but at the same time, I've kind of selfishly not shared it with the world. And I think if I can start sharing it with the world, it'll get more traction with me doing it because I can do it even when I'm on camera. And then at the same time, I wouldn't mind motivating other people to get into fly fishing. A lot of people view fly fishing as a kind of an elitist sport. And I think it's because the guys that aren't elitist fly fishermen don't wave the flag enough. And so I'm going to try to do more of that. Try to do more promoting the alternative types of fishing that I do that I've kind of selfishly kept to myself, you know? I tell people the evolution of a fisherman's any fish, mini fish, big fish, mini big fish, and then method fish. And to me, fly fishing is the same way, except when you start fly fishing and you start method fishing, the whole evolution starts over again. So you do any fish, then you want to catch mini fish, then you want to catch a big fish, then you want to catch many big fish, and then you want to catch a fish a certain method. Well, guess what? Once you start that, then you go back to start. So let's say it was any fish, mini fish, big fish, method fish, and the method is fly. Well, as soon as you start fly fishing, you go back to any fish. Then you get any fish on a fly. Then you want to catch many fish. You want to catch many fish on a fly. Then you try to catch big fish on a fly. And then you go back to an even more subset. Now you want to catch a certain fish on a certain fly. So now you're method fishing. You know, you're fly fishing, but you only want to catch them on a popper, or you only want to catch them on a deer hair slider, or you only want to catch them on a dry fly or whatever. So when you understand kind of the evolution of a fisherman and how it works, you realize it's just a continuous loop. And whenever you get to the pinnacle, you pretty much are starting back over again. And that's what's exciting about it. That's why it never gets boring. That's why it's always going to be engaging for me. And, I've said about numerous things in my life, I'm going to do it till it ain't fun anymore. Well, I've been doing this for 40 years, and I'm more addicted to it now and more obsessed about it now than I was before. I ain't got enough time left to not like it if I still like it as long as I've liked it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I guess that's about as good an answer as I could give to that question right now.
All right. Now, what about a particular spot? Is there a particular spot that sits at the top of your bucket list?
Well, yeah, and it's funny because it's not the same spot as where you're going to catch the golden dorado. I went to a place in the Seychelles Islands when I was in Singapore in the Navy, and we just kind of did a little pond hopper flight over there. I only had 8 hours on this one trip that I was on because of the fact that I was on active duty and I was on deployment, and I convinced my boss to let me jump on this little Tiger Airlines out of Singapore and fly over there, and it was just a short in and out day. The guys that were with me caught these monster bonefish. because they were good at it, and I just learned. I caught actually, I didn't catch a fish that day. I hooked two GTs, a giant trevally, that pretty much burned the drag out of my reel. But I'd like to go back there, and attempt to catch a giant bonefish. But more importantly, to just be in that, that atoll is what it's called. It's a group of islands, and just spend a few days. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to go back there. It was probably one of the most gorgeous places I've ever been in the world, and I've set foot in 78 countries and spent some time there. I've probably flown over or landed in another 60. I was in the, obviously I was in the military for 20 years, but I was in the Navy, and we are the world police. So I was all over the dang place, but that's one of the places that I'd love to go back to. I'd also like to explore some of the remote Russian rivers that are in, the Siberian side of Russia, where it's really cold water, and there's, a 4 to 5 month season that you can actually actively target some of these remote species of salmon. I'd love to go to New Zealand and chase some trout down there. But yeah, the Seychelles is by far at the top of that list right now.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So we are going into a segment here. It's called "What's Your Favorite?" It's pretty self-explanatory. I'm gonna ask you for your favorite in a few different categories here. So, do you have a favorite scripture?
Yeah, Genesis 9:3. It just basically it says that this world is our bounty. You know what I mean? So that's, to me, it's what ties me to what I do. It kind of justifies it. You know what I'm saying? So it makes it feel real to me. You know what I mean? Maybe it's selfish, but that's, John 3:16 obviously resonates with everybody. But that's my favorite, least known scripture.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have a favorite Bible story?
Yeah. And not for the reason that it is. I don't like to take Bible stories and make them into hyperbole or to metaphor, because I think the stories are the stories that they are. But the story of Samson and Delilah, where anything that you give too much power can rob you of everything you have, is the one that resonates the most with me. For him, it was, the hair was symbolic and the other things were symbolic, but when he gave over too much power to his obsession with this woman, not just from a standpoint of being in love, but for every facet of that relationship, it just goes a long ways to illustrate that you got to have balance. And if you don't, you can't put too much into any one thing and it not take away from everything else. So that's probably my favorite.
All right, absolutely. So, what's your favorite fish to catch?
Largemouth bass. I mean, it sounds cliche, but that's what I do. It's who I am. It's rewarding, and you can go 2 years without catching a monster bass and catch a monster bass, and you feel like you're 8 years old again, and it's the first big fish you've ever caught. And they're dynamic. You got to figure out where they're at, north, south, east, and west of the thing, and then you got to figure out what depth they're at, and then you got to figure out when you get them to eat. You got to figure out. They're just, in my opinion, one of the most dynamic species, the most diverse species. They have so many different places that they're found. They fascinate me. So yeah, largemouth bass.
Absolutely. What's your favorite fish to fish for?
So that's funny, because most people think that's the same question, but honestly, my favorite species is largemouth bass. My favorite fish to fish for is a tarpon, because you're not always going to catch them,
right?
And it's a challenge, and it's tough. And when you do hook one, you go from 0 to 200 miles an hour and back to 0 in a lot of cases. So I love the pursuit of tarpon, especially tarpon on fly. I've caught just under 100, like 94 tarpon. or landed 94. I've jumped, a couple hundred or more. But on fly, it's a different creature. So probably specifically tarpon and on a fly.
Okay, absolutely. So, what's your favorite fish to eat?
Hands down, crappie. Like, there ain't no, there's mahi, there's tilapia, there's all those fish out there. But for one, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for eating. We call them white perch or sockeye where I'm from, but a crappie. And to settle the debate, if you spell the word Happy, that's happy. That is not hoppy, so therefore it is not a crappie. It's a crappie. So, yeah,
Preach.
My favorite fish to eat is a crappie. So, yeah.
Yeah, there are a few things better than a good fried crappie sandwich.
Amen.
All right, so while we're on the subject of food, what's your favorite fish and snack?
Beef jerky. It's easy. It's it lasts forever. It's easy to eat. I don't really stop to eat a lot, so something that I can eat and keep fishing is good for me. Something that I don't need a spoon for. Something that's I'm pretty simple when it comes to that. Coffee, water, beef jerky, and some cheese sticks every now and then, but for the most part, beef jerky, coffee, and water. I'm good.
Absolutely. Any particular brand of beef jerky?
Man, that's the other thing. Honestly, no. Sometimes I'm in the mood for the thin cut, really hard, really tough stuff. Other times I'm more in the mood for the soft, tender, very flavorful stuff. Lots of times I'm in the mood for something in the middle. So, honestly, I'm a beef jerky snob at not being a beef jerky snob, meaning I don't have one particular brand. Just depending on the kind of thing, the mood that I'm in. Probably the best one that I use the most consistently is a company called Duke's. They make the little shorty sausages and all that, but they also have a beef jerky brand. And then Jack Links or Oh Boy Oberto. Those are probably the leading brands that that have the most distribution, so they're more readily available. You use them more, kind of a thing. And so, and because they're a known quantity, it's easier to not risk it. You know what I mean? It's like you don't want to buy a bag of beef jerky, get out in the water, and then when you get there, it's like garbage. So
right.
Probably those three major brands are my favorites.
Okay. So I'm not going to ask for any GPS coordinates or any special secret spots or anything, but what's your favorite body of water to fish on?
It's probably parts nostalgia, part big bass opportunity, part when I go there, I get to go home. Toledo Bend is still, again, it's, I try to put my finger on it. It's obviously a 2-time #1 bass lake in the world by Bassmaster Magazine. They catch tons of lunkers there. Every year they have the Lunker Award where they give out the replica bass and all that stuff. But it's a little bit riverine at the southern end on the Sabine River, lots of flats and things like that. It's got big water ledge fishing. It's got big hydrola fields, and then it's got creek arms and everything in between. So caught my first big bass there, which was a 6-pounder on the topwater. Grew up going there when I was a kid. Crisscrossed going from Corpus Christi to Virginia and back and forth across the coast to coast in my time in the Navy, and always was able to stop there. And it's also a very well-documented success story in a state agency working with another state agency in the state of Louisiana and the state of Texas getting together and deciding that it's in both of them's best interest to improve the fishery. So it's a conservation and management success story. It's a phenomenal fishery, and it feels like going home. So Toledo Bend.
All right. And last but not least, what's your favorite time of year to fish?
Winter. I don't shoot as many videos doing it. I don't catch as many fish, but it's funny with this whole social distancing thing going on. That's what I've been doing, my whole life is trying to get away from people. And wintertime, you've got less crowded ramps, you've got less crowded water. And this is going to sound wrong, but no matter how I say it, it's going to sound wrong. So I'll just say it. It's like when you're on TV for as long as I've been on TV, and you have a lot of followers. During the time that fair weather fishermen or people are out, it's really hard to get out on the water and not get like overrun, with people wanting to talk to you or pull up next to you or, whatever. And not that I don't appreciate it. I absolutely appreciate the heck out of it, and I couldn't do it without that support. But, to answer the question honestly, the wintertime is when you see the least people. There's less people on the water. The fishing's still good. Most people don't know it. But you kind of have it to yourself. So, yeah, winter.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to start wrapping things up here. So if you would, let us know what is going on or what is coming up for you and for KBF.
Well, I'd love to be able to tell you that, but right now we're kind of in the middle of a shutdown. So what's coming up for us is we're constantly evolving, making updates, and trying to adjust to the ever-changing landscape of this, this coronavirus pandemic. We are working very hard to continue to provide opportunities for the industry or for the community. We're revamping some of our stuff to go 100% virtual. Talking to our CVBs and tourism partners and sponsors to develop a plan so that as soon as we do kind of go back alive, what our game plan is. We're consolidating some events. And to be honest with you, man, I'm doing a lot of tackle organization. I'm going to go fishing when I can. I'm getting my ducks in a row, but I'm actually going to go back to drawing, and I'm going to get back to writing. So I'm going to spend a lot of time writing some blog posts and getting caught up on some content that I should have been putting out all along that I've just been too busy for. So to be honest with you, man, it's going to be a little bit of just going back to the basics.
All right. Absolutely. Did you want to give a shout out to any sponsors or supporters?
I'd love to say that I want to shout out any one particular sponsor. My biggest 4 sponsors are the ones that really make a significant contribution to making sure that I'm able to do what it is that I do. It doesn't diminish the others, but Real Tree Fishing, DZ, NRS Fishing, and Fish USA, and then followed closely behind them by Bonafide Kayaks, now Big Adventures, are really the ones that make it possible for me to do what I do. I couldn't do it without the support of all of my sponsors, but it'd be tough to sit here and try to list them all and not feel like I'm diminishing some of them, but and not trying to do that. The big 4, Real Tree Fishing, DZ, Fish USA, and NRS Fishing are the ones that really make a significant contribution to the bottom line to help us do what we do.
Absolutely. And if our listeners want to get in touch with you, follow you on social media, follow KBF on social media, join KBF, how do they find you?
So they can join KBF by going to kayakbassfishing.com. There's a shop button at the top, or you can just type in shopkbf.com and it'll take you to our store. Would love it for folks to become a member and join the community. It helps support what we're doing. If you want to follow me, you can follow me on all the social medias at Kayak Bass Fishing. Or you can search Chad Hoover, and I launched my personal Instagram actually the other day, Chad Hoover Fishing, so it's easier to get to the DMs with people wanting to connect with me personally. It's really hard to give my email address out because I just get overrun with emails. But Chad Hoover Fishing is going to be kind of the hub of all of my communications. I'm going to try to get to as many Instagram messages as I can there. Hopefully keep that page a little smaller. I'm not going to try to have, I think I've got 63,000 followers on Instagram right now. I don't need that many on the personal page, so I can keep it personal, But yeah, Chad Hoover Fishing on Instagram, Kayak Bass Fishing on Instagram, and then Chad Hoover on Facebook, and Kayak Bass Fishing on Facebook as well.
All right. Well, Chad, thank you again so much for coming on the show, and had a blast, and wish you the best, man.
Thank you, man. I enjoyed it. Looking forward to coming back sometime in the future, man, holler at me anytime. Appreciate you, brother. All right. You have a good one.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
And that wraps up our interview with Chad Hoover. I hope you enjoyed this episode. This interview was recorded March 30th, 2020. Again, I want to thank Chad Hoover for coming on the show and sharing his story with us. If you would like to learn more about Chad and about KBF, head on over to kayakbassfishing.com, and while you're there, go ahead and become a member. God bless. Thanks for listening to the Faith in Fishing podcast. If you like this episode, please give it a rating, a review, and make sure to subscribe on whatever app you're listening to so you never miss an episode. You can follow the podcast on social media at facebook.com/faithinfishingpodcast and Instagram at faithinfishingpod. Special thanks and a big shout out to Jonathan Inthelancy for helping me write, play, and record the music for the show, and to Tyler Worrell, the graphic designer behind our amazing logo. If you have any questions about faith, I encourage you to contact a pastor in your community. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, get out there and catch some fish, and I will catch you on the next episode.